Did you think negotiating your tech job offer would be simple? We did too, and after over 300 tech job offers from FANG to startups, we've seen it all. As a tech executive and one of the world's top negotiation coaches, making a counteroffer was just the tip of the iceberg, and we wish we knew what really worked from the start. So to help reduce the chaos and get you a clear path for your next negotiation, we're going to talk about the critical truths you need to know about tech salary negotiation that we wish we'd known sooner in our careers.
One of the experiences that I had at Microsoft, they had a team of recruiters called closer recruiters. The closer recruiter's whole job is to negotiate with you as a candidate. They are literally trained in this. I heard them coming out of a meeting one time saying, the candidate is always going to decline the first offer. Here's how to respond when they do that. It was really educational that these recruiters are also professional negotiators.
Exactly. They do actually want you to succeed, but they know the tactics, how to pressure you, how to even sometimes guilt trip you to get you into a position where you're going to accept less, because everyone around you tells you that you're going to risk losing your offer. Don't ask for more money. At the beginning of my career, I did not negotiate my first compensation because I thought I was at risk of losing it. I just really needed the job. But when I came into the job, I saw that a lot of the people on my team earned more than me. And as soon as that happened, I immediately negotiated a $100,000 increase in my offer. I realized that you really can negotiate safely. And in our time doing 300 negotiations, we've not seen anyone lose an offer.
When you're working with a coach, that's a huge part of our job, risk mitigation, making sure that we are looking at all of the factors and preventing you from increasing the probability of risk. Ever notice when you try to talk to your family about a negotiation, they act confused, like, why bother negotiating? This is a $400,000 offer to begin with. Just accept it already. But we all know that negotiation is pretty much expected by these companies. At this point, over 50% of folks negotiate their job offers, and companies literally build that into their process. One of the big lessons is connecting with mentors, recruiters at former companies, former managers, trusted colleagues, folks who are negotiation experts who really know what this market looks like.
Think about something that you did in the past that makes you slightly uncomfortable. Everyone feels that way about negotiation at first. But just like riding your bike for the first time, going snowboarding, making your first trip outside the country, you will not regret doing this. And after helping over 300 professionals negotiate, we've learned that the discomfort is actually a positive sign. The less you're comfortable actually means that you're probably not asking and pushing enough. If you are feeling that discomfort, it means you're actually pushing beyond what most candidates ever do. Then when you get to that limit, that's where you actually find out what is your true market rate for that company. And that's why this lesson is recognizing that negotiations should feel uncomfortable. The moment you embrace this feeling, you're going to start seeing the opportunities that other people are missing. Now, I've been a hiring manager for almost a decade, and you might wonder, what are hiring managers actually thinking about during a negotiation? And most people worry that they seem aggressive or damaging relationships. But let me tell you about a candidate that was helping a few years back negotiate their role at Adobe. We met up recently with their current hiring manager, and that hiring manager actually said that she was one of the best negotiators they'd ever seen, and they really respected her after she negotiated so well. She was able to get an Uplevels. She got over $115,000 increase, and it actually gained her reputation and respect in the company before she came in. And if you do your negotiation right, people will actually respect you and like you more when you're coming in the door, even if it is uncomfortable in that moment. And that's why this lesson is to understand that professional negotiation does build respect. And when done right, negotiation becomes a leadership skill.
I think it's important to remember, too, that it's very easy to let our emotionality rule, whether that's fear or whether that's even our pride. We've seen an individual who was down-leveled 3 levels below what he was expecting to be placed at. And of course, his knee-jerk reaction is to be like, I'm walking away from this. This is not a good opportunity for me. They clearly don't respect me. The important thing we did in that moment was pause, and we connected and said, okay, what could we potentially gain here? So we sat down with the hiring manager and presented this person's 30, 60, and 90-day goals for their time in the position and outlined why the job title would really increase the stakeholder buy-in. And the hiring manager literally said, this is one of the most intelligent arguments I've ever seen. We were able to get them up-leveled to the appropriate level. Up-levels are challenging. Usually they have about a 25% success rate. But if you go in and you make an argument like this, it's way more likely that you're going to be able to win over the favor of the hiring manager and not let your ego decide for you.
Yeah, if you want to get an up level, it's not about title chasing. It's about making an argument that makes a difference for the value of the role, beneficial to the company because you're going to be able to do your role better, but also keep you aligned in the long term.
And dovetailing back to what you were talking about before with reputation, a lot of times people have this concern about, oh, what if I don't get this up level? Or are they just going to take the opportunity away from me? That's not really the case. Another thing to be mindful about is that you could potentially even get above top of band compensation for the level that you've been placed at just by making that request.
As a leader myself, the thing that I most concerned myself was, am I bringing this person in at the right level that's going to be successful for them, right? But most people negotiated. And at the very least, I was able to find a way to make them happy with the opportunity. So even if they didn't get that title, I was able to give them, like you said, the above band offer. I was able to get an exception made saying, hey, we don't think this person is in our leveling matrix ready for that next role. We want to give them growth, but at the same time, we can give them more scope in the role, more equity, more cash. We can give them a cash bonus up front. There's so many things that we can do behind the scenes beyond the limits of our pay bands to get somebody on board. And then in those rare cases where they're actually able to make a great intelligent argument about why they should be a higher level, I'm very happy to change my mind on that. It's not to say that titles don't matter in your career. Titles do matter in your career. As soon as you hit, a senior position, it's kind of hard for you to go back unless you're going to a much bigger company. If you hit a VP role, I've seen many executives be very, very hesitant to go back, but some of them are even going back to principal positions or staff positions from a vice president position, especially in today's market, or if they're going to a much bigger company. Titles are important, but they're definitely not everything. In many cases, they're not the most important thing. When you're going into a new company, think about the scale of that company. What is the reputation you have in that space? Are you going to actually be qualified for that thing? Is that the company that's going to bring you to the next level? Is it going to open up new doors for you? Is it going to be massive growth? And is it going to give you higher compensation? There are vice presidents at pretty big billion-dollar companies making less money than a senior manager or even just a senior individual contributor at some big tech companies. You have to consider what's the biggest growth lever for your career over the next few years.
And, that kind of goes into the strategic step down. Sometimes you have to be thoughtful about maybe you're doing a job title change. Or maybe you're going from a Series C startup and now you're looking at FANG. Unfortunately, the reality is, even if you are a director at a Series C startup, FANG is not going to think that's the same as a director level there. But if you can be strategic about when you make those steps, the long-term revenue gain and potential for job title increase and career trajectory is absolutely massive. So you always have to be doing that cost-benefit analysis to determine, is this actually going to make sense for me, right?
So you want to know when most people really lose their negotiation power? It happens in the very first recruiter call. We hear this all the time. They share their compensation expectations too early. They share details about their other opportunities, but you can't accurately value yourself at the beginning before you really understand what the full scope is, and you don't have any leverage internally at the company. You might have all these fancy titles and where you've been at before, but the company doesn't know that you're the right fit for this role. The negotiation value at the beginning of this conversation is not going to be nearly what it's going to be when you get to that offer stage. And so you want to save up all the negotiation until the end. The lesson here is that your goal in the compensation conversation at the very first recruiter call is to get to the next stage so you can prove yourself and negotiate later.
Yeah, absolutely. Not only could you price yourself out of the opportunity by calling out a number too high, but you can also make yourself appear too junior and call out a number and maybe have the recruiter second guessing if this is even the right opportunity for you. With the market the way that it is, we really don't want to create any more reasons that you won't get this opportunity. We have to make sure that we're really securing it as much as possible. Negotiations are an information game. Information is currency here. We need to be strategic about what information we're sharing and when. Let's say you try to deflect this question by saying, I'm waiting on some offers from Google. That's just going to be like blood in the water for the recruiter. What level is that position at Google? How far along are you with those conversations? So you're expecting an offer when? And then what happens if you don't get that Google offer? We have to make sure that whatever narrative we're creating is consistent. If we mention a Google offer now, that is a thread that they're going to pull on later.
So even as an executive, when I went into my first job search, I thought I had my salary expectations super high. They were 2.5 times what I was making before, is what I said as my number when executive recruiter asked me my compensation expectations. I had no idea this was way below what they were going to say. I could hear it immediately in their voice voice, they were thinking, oh man, this person is probably way too junior for this role if they're asking this number. I thought it was an outlandish number, and I had to really dig myself out of that hole. I was able to, but it was way more difficult than I had to make it. And if it went back again, I would have held that conversation till later. And when I had my biggest compensation that I've ever had in an offer, it was when I was controlling the flow of information from beginning to end. So that lesson really resonates.
Absolutely. The amount of times I have seen recruiters ask for unvested equity totals is incredibly high. That is really scary because the reason they're asking for that is they're looking for that cliff, and that removes a lot of leverage you potentially have. I've seen them even ask for former pay stubs. These recruiters can be pretty aggressive with the information they're demanding out of you. You got to be aware that every piece of information you're going to share is going to be dissected under a microscope, and you have to be ready and armed with answers to all of those questions, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think another lesson there is to always show the best photo of the house. If you're thinking about buying a house in real estate, right? They're not showing you the awkward basement with the uneven floors. They're showing you the beautiful photo of the painted front door, the newly designed kitchen. They're showing you the best photos of the house. Whenever you're talking about your offer, you only want to reveal the best parts of the information there, and be careful that if you have revealed too much information that's not necessary, they're going to be able to pull those threads and find the ugly parts, right? And so it's really important for how you frame things and how much of the information. Do you say the name of the company? Do you say the level of the role? Do you say the compensation numbers? And if they push you and ask you for those things, are you actually going to reveal those? The lesson is always show the best photo of your house.
I love that analogy. I think that's great. That goes double for when you're sharing stuff about your competing opportunities. You can portray your leverage in so many different ways. Let's say that you've done one interview with Meta. You could say, oh, I'm pretty early stages with Meta. I haven't done that many interviews yet. Or you could say, I'm in consideration with Meta. I love that sentence so much. I'm in consideration. It really could mean anything. It could mean that you have an offer in hand. It could mean that you've applied for a position online. It could mean you're midway through interviews, right? But if you're just strategic about the way that you're presenting it, it's going to reflect far more flattering on you than if you give them every granular piece of information, right? I think a lot of times when we're in a situation like this, we feel the need to over-provide. And that's just simply not the case. You can convey a lot with just one simple sentence. When that kind of dovetails into our next lesson here, let's say you're talking to Microsoft as your leverage opportunity. I am a former Microsoftian, but I can't deny that they are known for down-leveling individuals and not always paying the most competitively. If you end up getting an offer from Microsoft, it really might not be as competitive as you're hoping to use. But if you're early stages with them, it's a lot easier to say things like, I expect them to offer me this. I expect them to place me at X level, right? And those expectations are perfectly valid. Just as you have comp expectations for some companies, you also have expectations on leveling, placement, on location, all that kind of good stuff. In this instance, the more that we can portray this early stage opportunity in kind of a vague way and go off of your expectations, that will be substantially stronger. And that's really what this lesson is focusing on, is an early stage opportunity can really be far stronger.
And that lesson actually extends beyond just if you're in consideration with another job. I've seen actually candidates, especially when they're earlier in their search, say, I haven't even talked to a bunch of companies. I know that those other companies are expected to pay these amounts, and they don't even have a recruiter call scheduled. But even if that's not the case, I've seen candidates who are some of the top candidates be able to do this.
And this next lesson that we're going to dive into here is controlling the narrative. And a big part of that is making sure if you are coming in and you're saying, I haven't been actively applying because I'm happy with my current position. If you come in and reveal that you're interviewing with 4 other companies, that's not a very consistent narrative now, right? So we have to think about what is the story that we're telling the recruiter and what are we hoping that the recruiter is going to walk away with the impression of, right? Are they going to walk away feeling like they're confident in why you are excited about this opportunity? Are they walking away feeling like unsure that you're really interested in this opportunity? All those factors have a part here, right?
Exactly.
It's really in your best interest to try to look at offers holistically and approach negotiation from all angles. Most people focus on just an incremental increase of $20K in their base salary, but what you realize when you're missing out there is if you walk away from an offer that's just $200,000 base, you could potentially negotiate far more on top of that, including things like equity and signing bonuses that could end up earning you almost double that in the long run.
Yeah, exactly. And the equity component is something that a lot of people miss out on. Most executives I talk to, no matter how high up they are in the food chain, they still focus too much just base salary. Can I get this 300K to 350K? Can I get from 350K to 400K? If you look at the chart of your compensation on a 1 to 2 year basis, which is how most people do it, it looks flat, right? I'm making the same this year versus next year, but people are missing the bigger long-term picture. You have to look in 4 or 5 year increments, because if you get a little bit extra equity now, let's say you're getting 50K more equity versus 10K more base salary, which you think is, liquid cash today, that 50K equity could then increase the amount of refreshers you get and even become 50% more. And that equity can also increase over time with stock appreciation without you actually investing the cash. Versus if you got the cash today, you don't have the cash from 4 years now to invest and be able to get that upside when you're investing in stock in a company. And so people really underestimate the value of equity, especially in public companies or in later stage companies.
Yeah, equity is one of the most negotiable components, right? And it's because it's not guaranteed to you. Especially if we're talking about a startup, they're always going to be more willing to give you equity, right? But even with big public companies, I've seen the most dramatic increases come from the equity grant. And as Colin was talking about earlier, a lot of these big tech companies offer something called refreshers, which is basically incremental equity grants added on to your original grant that can help, in some cases, 1.5x your total equity value. And with companies like Apple and Meta, they really offer very competitive percentages. So you could end up really making quite a bit of money there long term just from your equity alone. Now, obviously, stock options are a whole other kettle of fish, right? And I think we can debate about the value of those till the cows come home. But it's still important to think about that in the long term. If you're at a startup that you believe in, there's not a non-zero probability that there could be a liquidity event, right? And you'd be shooting yourself in the foot by not at least understanding what those stock options look like and buy into the value at least a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah. Even if you get that equity, right? That equity means nothing if you don't protect it, if you don't secure it. And so this is something that a lot of people don't even learn when they're executives. I just worked with a C-suite executive, and the most important thing wasn't getting 0.1% extra equity or, 10K more extra equity on their offer. The most important thing was getting a larger exercise window or getting severance, including how much equity they would get in the case that they get laid off from the company. And it's just a matter of fact that a lot of people can get laid off, especially in startups, but even in big tech companies. Things happen. And the best time to negotiate that is not when you're getting laid off, when you're stressful, you have no negotiating power, but it's when you're actually joining. Especially in these markets today, and especially given what's happened over the last few years, you definitely should negotiate your severance early, and you should negotiate protections for your equity so that you get increased vesting after that and a long exercise window.
Yeah. So look, one thing that I was honestly proud of myself in doing very early in my negotiation experience, one of the first offers I ever negotiated was with a very small startup. I was actually the first hire. And I was not 100% confident that the company would be successful long term. And of course, I didn't maybe phrase it in the same way that I would now, but I did ask for severance up front because I knew that I needed to protect myself in case something happened. And they were willing to do that for me. Now, the main thing that I'd recommend in approaching this, particularly if you've been the victim of a layoff before, is to come in and be honest and say, I really believe in the future of this company, but I owe it to myself and my family to really ensure that if anything were to happen, I'm protected. So can you help me understand what's your severance policy here? Now, of course, if you're not the first hire, it's very likely that they have some kind of severance policy set in place, right? Particularly at a big FANG company, they usually have a pretty standardized amount. Usually it's based upon how many weeks or months or years you've worked there, and they'll pay you out a certain amount based on that. But especially if you're at a startup, there's a decent chance that they don't really have a formalized process in place, and that it could be advantageous for you to just discuss it up front and see what could be possible, right? Because what you don't want to have happen is you get laid off with nothing to cover the gap, right?
The analogy I have for severance is like a prenuptial agreement, right? Which has all the same controversy around it as it does here. Most people are worried about when they're thinking about, should I negotiate severance, is I don't want to talk about the end when I'm trying to talk about the beginning, right? But the fact is that if you wait until the divorce proceedings to try to do the negotiation, things are not going to work out for you. In companies, it's not like marriage. It's going to end mind at some point in time. The best time to figure out what is the most equitable thing to do for both of you at the time when that separation happens, the best time to discuss that is at the beginning before you sign the offer. That's when you have the leverage to do it. And even people who are senior individual contributors are able to do this. This is not just from the executives, it's just more common amongst executives. And it's becoming more common nowadays. So I recommend all the people who are not doing it definitely know that you can negotiate severance at many companies. Some companies will have policies where you don't do this. They'll have to make exceptions and you'll have to have leverage to be able to do that. But many companies will allow you to do this.
Yeah. Much easier to negotiate your prenup than your postnup, right? So just be aware.
Yeah, exactly. It's much easier to negotiate that than your divorce too.
And just remember too, the best way to control the flow of information is to stop talking. And I know that this is a hard one, especially for me, because as you've noticed, I like to talk. But one of the big lessons here is sitting in silence can actually be one of the strongest things you can do in a negotiation. Not only does it control the flow of information, but it also allows to ramble. Recruiters love the sound of their own voice. They will talk your ear off if they can. Same with hiring managers. They love to ramble. So give them the opportunity to share as much as they want, and you might find some interesting nuggets in there. I always guide people when they're hearing a first offer, when the recruiter first shares the numbers, just sit in silence for a few seconds afterwards until the recruiter asks you a direct question. Even if that question is, hey, Colin, are you still there? That's fine, right? It's just like letting that moment sit for a little bit and just practicing what that silence can feel like. Because as someone who can sometimes say the wrong thing in the wrong time, it's important to know how to stop yourself from doing that. Best way to do it is to stop talking.
And that's actually happened with a client of mine recently, where I told them that on the call when they're giving you the offer, when they tell you those details, just count to 5 Mississippi, which is a long time. Longer than you think. And I said, if they don't get by 5 Mississippi, just do a little cough. So it shows that you're not going to be the one talking next and that you're waiting, and count to 5 Mississippi again. And they said they did this. They said they got to 7 Mississippi, and then the recruiter started negotiating for me. They started saying, oh, well, actually, they actually really liked you and we want to be flexible on this. So I want to make sure that we get you the thing that you wanted. And it immediately became something else. But what most people's instinct is to do is to fill that dead space and talk. And the lesson there is that silence is one of your best tools in a negotiation, and that it can actually help the other side negotiate on your behalf. A little bit of discomfort can go a long way.
And I tell this to clients too, a lot of times it can feel really scary. These recruiters are putting a ton of pressure on you. They're turning the screws. Like we talked about earlier, they're trained negotiators, and a lot of negotiations using emotional manipulation tactics to make you scared, whether that's giving you a tight offer deadline or telling you that they have a ton of other candidates in the pipeline or whatever that looks like, right? As scary as it might feel, you're not in a life or death situation. You can pause. And especially if you're talking on the phone, I always appreciate modern technology. Oh, the call dropped. Now you can take a moment, breathe, give them a call back. It's okay. You're allowed to take a moment to, and if the recruiter is giving you a ton of aggressive pushbacks, even just sitting in silence can be educational for them to be like, oh, maybe I've gone a little bit too far. Maybe I've been a little bit too aggressive, and then they might dial it back. So I know that a lot of times recruiters use these emotional manipulation tactics to get in your head. They'll tell you that there's a lot of other candidates in the pipeline. And to be honest, with the state of the tech economy, it can really mess with your head as well. Just the knowledge that there are so many unemployed individuals from really high quality companies looking at similar opportunities as you. And the most important thing to remember is that you got this opportunity for a reason. Do not let these recruiters get in your head, okay? The hiring manager likes you. That's what's the most important thing. And my main lesson that if I could instill this in, that would be my goal, is just to recognize it's not the end of the world. The recruiter is manipulating you here. That's okay. Just breathe and keep moving forward with confidence. In those moments where the recruiters are emotionally manipulating you, because that's what they are doing, a great way to think about that is to kill them with kindness. They are going to be using scary tones of voice. They might be threatening to do things like pull the offer. But what I always encourage folks to do is something called the excitement sandwich. This is like a version of the compliment sandwich, getting feedback. But instead, in the negotiation, it's about emphasizing you're excited for this position. The one thing that's holding you back is the compensation. But if we were able to get there, I'd be really excited to sign. If you go back to these things and keep a friendly, even tone of voice, that is going to be absolutely massive. Because if this recruiter is hitting you with all of this aggressive verbiage, if you are just a brick wall of kindness, all of that aggressive energy is going to bounce off of you and back onto them. And later on, they're going to think, wow, I was being a little bit rude to Colin before. I think that might have been a little bit unnecessary or too far. So the biggest lesson there is use that excitement sandwich and kill them with kindness.
Yeah. And that actually gets to one of the most critical ingredients to a successful negotiation. Most people think that they don't want to negotiate because it's like haggling, right? And that you're being combative in a negotiation. Most of the successful negotiations, especially the ones that get the outlandish, like outlier opportunities, are not the aggressive negotiations. One of the four most important ingredients in a successful negotiation is to be likable, to be liked by the other side. There's a way to negotiate in an uncomfortable way where there's tension, where there's disagreement, but that you're still likable. And the excitement sandwich is a great way to do that. One way that I like to handle, for example, the offer call is to A, be very excited about the company and the role, but to be neutral about the offer. So at the same time, you're not giving away, I'm accepting this offer, but you are excited about the role. So when they tell you the offer, if it's a lowball offer, for example, you don't react to the offer with your emotions. You react always with the kindness by thinking, I'm excited about the company, excited about the role, and neutral about the offer. And the reason you're neutral about the offer is because that does not trigger a negotiation live on the call. As soon as they see that you make a wince in your face, as soon as you do that, which is another reason why we like audio calls versus video calls for these offer calls. As soon as they see those things, they're going to say, this person is about to negotiate with me. Let me start making arguments. Let me try to get them to agree. Let me combat them on the call. What you want to do is stay excited about the offer. Thank you so much. You've gone to bat for me. So again, a likability with the recruiter, so they're willing to continue advocating for you. This role has been great. I love to talk to the team. So excited about the role in the company. Love the mission. And thank you for walking me through the details of the offer. I never make decisions live on a call. I'm going to talk to my family and my mentor about this, and I'll get back to you in a reasonable time. Yeah. And then you can continue off the call, right? And so that gives you the ability to step back, plan, get all that information that we said not to divulge early in the conversations in the first recruiter calls, and be able to now package it into a very coherent way to go about doing your negotiation. And that includes, for example, doing a 30, 60, 90 conversation with your hiring manager or skip manager.
You've probably heard a lot about what happens behind the scenes at these companies. There's these amorphous comp committees, there's the C-suite level executives, but who's the biggest key player for you? Who is the biggest advocate for you? It's not the recruiter, it's the hiring manager, okay? And the reason for that is all the members of the comp committee are made up of the hiring manager's colleagues and maybe even friends, right? These are higher level individuals who work at the company. And so it's very much in your best interest to get the hiring manager bought into you. Not even just from that perspective, but also because who doesn't want a boss that's actually going to advocate for them? Who doesn't want a boss that actually believes in you as an employee and the impact you're going to have? Right? And so if you can sit down with your future manager and walk them through your 30, 60, and 90-day goals for your time in this position, being as detailed as you possibly can, not just regurgitating the AI written job posting, okay? We're going in and really understanding, okay, what problems are the team trying to solve right now? What solutions have they implemented and what's worked and what's not worked? And I'll tell you this, in the 300 negotiations that Colin and I have done cumulatively, you know how many times I've seen this backfire? 0. Okay. Mm-hmm. Every time it results in a hiring manager being way more bought into you as a candidate. Every time it results in them wanting to go back and advocate for you more than the recruiter does. And so if you can really get them bought in, the goal is that after that conversation, they'll say, yeah, get Colin what he needs. Okay. I don't care what number it is. Just go get him what he needs. So if you can focus on selling that impact of yours in a really educated and detailed way, that is going to work wonders for your negotiation. And the 30, 60, 90 is something that we encourage every single client to do, regardless of your level of experience, regardless of your job title. Always have this conversation with the hiring manager. I think it's really worth your time to sit down and try to invest in that one meeting, because that one meeting could really impact your entire career trajectory, could impact the difference between you making 100 plus 200K more in your annual compensation, right?
And the hiring manager is the best person, and you should definitely start with them, but they're not the only person. In fact, the skip manager, or sometimes even someone on the comp committee, I've seen be in the loop here. So you can ask for conversations with the manager of your manager. Sometimes they have the authority to do it. In many organizations, even if your manager's like, I want this employee, but I do not know how to get the compensation to work, how to get the title to work for them. But if you talk to their manager and you understand what their motivations are, that's the person who can actually make sometimes that executive decision to overwrite whatever the policy is and get you as a candidate. And if they don't have a face-to-face time with you, if you aren't asking them questions about why they care about this role, why it's important, and then relating that back to what you've talked about and what your experience is, then they're not going to know that, hey, this is a candidate we need on our team, and let's change the rules to make this person come in the door. And it's something that I've seen happen to myself. I've been that skip leader. I've had my manager make exceptions to be able to make great hires for me and swoop down. And I've seen this countless times with other candidates, no matter how big or small the company. So the lesson is get your hiring manager, get your skip manager, and the recruiter all on your side. And if they're all on your side, then your probability of getting an exceptional offer is exponentially higher.
Absolutely. You got to portray yourself as an exceptional candidate to get an exceptional offer. And let's be real, a lot of times when you are in interviews or even when you have an offer, there's still like maybe 5 or 6 other candidates waiting in the wings if you are determined to be too expensive or if you decline the offer. Set yourself up for success. Prove that you are the exceptional candidate by doing that great 30, 60, 90.
Yeah, and you want to ride the wave of momentum for a negotiation, right? And that means you want to get to your ask for the counteroffer at the time where they want you the most, right? Where they have the highest energy. And there's a half-life to that. It decays over time from the moment that they give you the offer. So it kind of starts spiking when they give you that offer call. They're super excited. They're like, behind the scenes, I've been there. Let's give them an offer. Let's give them a great offer. Let's hope that, maybe they'll negotiate 1 or 2 more times, but, it's close enough for them. And then you get on that call and that's excitement. But that's not the peak excitement, right? You still need to galvanize everyone behind the scenes. Sometimes the hiring manager doesn't even know what offer you're getting at some of these big companies. Oh, yeah. And they don't know what your expectations are. They haven't been in all those recruiter calls. And don't assume everything you said to a recruiter is perfectly translated behind the scenes. So you ask for that role vision call with the skip manager. And then once you've done those things, those people now have the highest excitement. They're coming out of a conversation. You had a great conversation. They see how you align with their mission and how you're the perfect person who's going to de-risk or increase the probability of whatever they want to get done. And that is now the moment where you can make your counteroffer. You send that in. That's the peak moment. And if you wait too long after that, it decays. So the lesson here is always ride the momentum of the negotiation. If you have another offer, you have to warm it up again. And that brings me to the next lesson, which is if your negotiation cools down, let's say you have to wait next opportunity before you're able to re-engage in negotiations and do your counteroffer, you need to warm everyone back up again. All your advocates need to be warmed up before you do your negotiation. And I've seen this so many times. People will think they do all the right things. Everyone's so excited. Then they come back 2 weeks later to negotiate. And then all of a sudden that excitement has died down and they're not getting the things they want. They're not getting any more traction. They're bringing a hard line. It's because they haven't done the work again to have those conversations. So no matter how much you think you've built up goodwill and emotion amongst the people who are on the advocating team, you always can do a little bit more to build that connection, to tie your story together, to make it easy for them to justify why they should give you greater compensation.
This just really demonstrates the fact that internal leverage is worth its weight in gold. You can have 1,000 competing offers and still misplay your hand and not get an increase. But with a hiring manager on your side, with a skip manager on your side, and a recruiter who actually likes you and goes to bat for you, that's really going to make it or break your negotiation. And one of the biggest things that we should really talk about is letting fear be a driver. What are the main things that people are scared of? They're scared of reputation being tarnished, and they're also scared of an offer getting pulled or potentially being laid off in the future, right? I know I was working with someone in 2022 in the thick of the layoffs when all of the stress was high, when offers were getting pulled left and right, and we were negotiating with TikTok and she was very anxious about the offer potentially getting pulled. It took a lot of chatting and just making sure that we were addressing these fears, but also mitigating the risks. Because at the end of the day, those fears are just risks, right? So this candidate was experiencing a good amount of fear about the offers being pulled based on what she had been hearing in the news and hearing from her friends. And we talked a lot about how can we really move forward with a path to success. We really focused on building that internal hiring manager buy-in by focusing on really demonstrating that excitement, that passion for the opportunity, really focusing on what values she'd be having on day 0, not on day 50, right? And she was able to come in with this hiring manager dialogue and really captivate them with her potential impact. And because of all of those things, as well as being extremely strategic in how much we were asking for, how we were asking for it, using appropriate justifications while still really showing that we were excited about the opportunity, we were able to get her a substantial increase in a market that was more risky than it had ever really been. And by using those same tactics moving forward, we found that it's a lot easier to mitigate those risks of offers being pulled and relationships being tarnished. And in our time of valued, we've never had an offer be pulled. Look, it's easier said than done, right? To learn to navigate these conversations and avoid having an offer pulled and how to revive one if it is pulled, check out this video here.